everybody. We're just about to go live in 1 minute. Please pop messages in the comment box. Please be part of the event this evening. Many ways to get involved. We want this to be your event. This is your event for the community of North Kensington. Let's go. Many ways to get involved. We want this to be your event. Your event for the community.
So we are inviting you today to join us in celebrating the power of our community to organise.
And now that the council has made a commitment that the library will remain a public asset and a library, this is a living testimony to the truth that collectively we can and do make a huge difference.
Come and join the Friends of North Kensington Library to celebrate a new phase in this historic building's life.
As one of the first public-built libraries, this library has always represented the energy and commitment of communities, organising to secure their future through self-education.
However, in recent years, the commitment of councils to this principle has been weakened by successive governments.
We all know it took the awful events of Grenfell Tower to put an end to plans that would have handed our library over to private interests.
But our diverse community here in North Kensington has a long and proud history
of standing up and resisting the onslaught of developers.
When us friends of the library got together, the whole case looked absolutely hopeless. And it continued to look hopeless for much of the campaign.
Still, we persisted.
Through the most difficult moments, when losing the library to private interests seemed like a fait accompli, the Friends of North Kensington Library came together.
We were endlessly supported by the many community groups and organisations that make up the network of self-supporting and community-led groups that have been so important to securing the future of public space in this area.
Even when they are in ways we cannot predict, could not hope for, or aren't able to perceive. Go, Isis.
Hi, greetings. So I take it we've gone live. Welcome, everyone. This is the first of 7 days of events. 7 days, 7 talks, celebrating the fact that we saved North Kensington Library as a community. And this most fitting that today is called Our Libraries Reimagining Their Future. I have 3 panel guests. I will also ask Toby to join in the introduction to this program, as we have been collectively, as Our Library Saved, which is an offshoot of Friends of North Kensington Library, really the organising arm, if you want to call it that, have been working together to put this event on. So let me hand over to Toby, because he's going to introduce the start of the event, and then we will go back to our panel, who are Ed Darfan and Sean Condon, and obviously, Toby, over to you.
Thank you very much, Isis. Thank you. It's great to be here this evening. I have to say, I wasn't expecting in March 2021 to be sitting in a virtual library, but it's quite an amazing thing to be here. Looking forward to this evening and the rest of the 7 events as well, of course, that's stretching out all the way till next Saturday. I hope many people will join us over this weekend and over this week. And of course, all of this is going to be recorded. So hopefully, if you miss any of them, you can always catch up. But first off, before we really get into things, before we get started, here's a short film to remind us of why we're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so here we are.
Thank you for making that,
Thank you,
Toby.
Isis.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
the film started off by setting the context as to how we're here this evening. In 2016, the campaign started to save North Kensington Library, as we've seen, one of the first libraries that was built through public subscription, our library, our community's library. And the campaign, luckily, was won. The circumstances of how we won the campaign, of course, are pretty tragic because they relate directly to what happened at Grenfell. However, we are here now in 2021, and we will continue to support our library. And so this evening is an opportunity to hear from our community, from people who are involved with the libraries and all of us, about how we feel about the future of libraries. As we said, this is the first of 7 events. We have, coming up next week, we've got an event on our homes and our towers, our learning, our 23 acres, our environment, our health and well-being, and our future, which is children and young people. So you will be hearing from various panels throughout the week at our gatherings. We're framing these as gatherings. We as a community are gathering together. It's unfortunate we can't be together in person, but we're using technology to ensure that we get together virtually. So just to set a couple of things, just to say that some of the key themes that run through all our gatherings are celebrating our community and what we've achieved. We must celebrate ourselves. It's important that we recognize what we achieved. Hearing our voices, that's you out there. The panel members are also part of our community, but we want to really hear from you in a safe, brave space where you can raise and air concerns and issues. We want to show that we value you by respecting and recognizing that we as a community are experts. We have lived experience and we know who we are and what we want for ourselves. This is also in the spirit of co-design, of co-production, of participation, and of solidarity building, which is really important. We want to keep building solidarity, not only within North Kensington, but with other communities facing similar struggles. So what I'm going to do is introduce myself, but before I do that, I'm just going to mention that Toby very kindly, besides being part of the organizing team and also hosting another event this week, has stepped up as our panelist because very sadly, one of our scheduled panelists suffered a bereavement. So we want to send our condolences to her family and to send love and positivity to her at this difficult time. So I'm Isis and I'm a local resident. I was very briefly involved with the campaign to save the library. I spent most of 2016 at home. I describe myself as an African born in Trinidad and Tobago, and I was at home in Trinidad and Tobago. So I came back to find out what was going on. I've been around and I would say I'm not one of the most active people that was involved in the campaign, but I've always supported it and I've always supported my local library. It's been a big part of my life. And my daughters were born and raised in Kensington and Chelsea. And the library, North Kensington, was a place that I spent a lot of time with them as children. Libraries are important. And I believe that we must keep the future of libraries as an essential part of our community. So having said that, that's an introduction to me. I would like to hand over to the panelists for them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do. So perhaps I can start. I mean, the way this is going virtually, I see Toby first, but I think I'll start with Sean and then move across the other way.
Well, thank you. Before I begin, I've just got 2 thank yous. First of all, to you, Toby, for making that video. It's important to see the names going up as well, so we can remember and to respect. So thank you for that. And thank you, Isis, for inviting me in. And not only that, saying that was part of the community at North Kensington, because that's very important to me. I've just felt nothing but love from the community of Kensington, and as someone who doesn't live doesn't live as part of the community, I felt very taken in by everyone. So thank you for that. So my name's Sean. I am one of the librarians, or actually my full title is a service delivery manager for Kensington and Chelsea libraries. I was the librarian at North Kensington Library up until very recently, until about a year and a half ago. And I actually was only part of the library for about a year and a half. I joined in October, well, about 6 months after Grenfell. So like ISIS, I wasn't even in the country at the time of Grenfell, but the shockwaves went across the whole world. So we did see. Before I came to Kensington and Chelsea, I actually started in Lewisham Libraries. I started as just a temp one day. I was given the offer of being either a temporary placement working in a bank or a temporary placement working in the library. They said for the bank, it's better hours and you'll get more money. For the library, you're not going to get very many hours and it's doesn't pay very well. So of course I went straight for the library, and I've been part of libraries ever since. And though I've not been, I came after the campaign for the Save North Kensington Library. I part of the Lewisham Library campaigns back in the day, when we went from having 15 libraries down to 12. So yeah, I also feel the same sort of affinity, and yeah, that would be where I stand, I suppose. So thank you for inviting me to be in, and maybe I should hand over left to Ed.
Great. Well, I'd like to say thank you very much to Toby and Isis for inviting me this evening. Again, I'd like to point out that that film was very moving, and tomorrow is actually the 3-year, 9-month anniversary of the fire, and it's hard to believe that the time has passed so quickly and yet so tortuously slowly in many ways in terms of the progress in legacy and justice that has not happened yet. But yeah, my name's Edward Daffon. I've lived in Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea all my life. I moved into Grenfell Tower in 2001. In 2010, I co-founded the Grenfell Action Group with Francis O'Connor. In 2012, we started the Grenfell Action Group blog. Our concerns were mostly around the borough's fixation on getting their hands on all the social housing and handing it over to their friends in development. But at the same time, we noticed that they had a fetish for getting their hands on our community space. And that's why, along with groups like Westway 23, we set around trying to protect some of the public assets in North Kensington, the Warrington College, Westway Information Centre, to name a couple, and of course our beloved library. And of course it is absolutely tragic that the only reason that we're here sitting in the library, albeit virtually this evening, is because of what happened at Grenfell. And yeah, that's a shocking thing indeed. I'd like to hand over to Toby.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, it's difficult to know what to say when you suddenly recall that. So excuse me a moment, just as we obviously manage with that fact. I myself have been a part of this community for I suppose 15 or 20 years, in terms of being a market trader, being a school governor. I went to school locally, secondary school. I've been heavily involved in lots of different community work, working with many schools and youth clubs, and of course, being drawn into local community campaigns in the past 5 or 6 years. I feel like I was drawn in because of the work I was doing in the community, and it was difficult not to be drawn in by the things that happen within this community, and the energy and the passion that people bring to all of the spaces everywhere. When you work in these spaces, when you work in the youth clubs, when you work in the schools, in the libraries, in the community centres, in the activity spaces, in the adventure playgrounds, you work on Carnival, and you begin to get this sense that there is this network of people who are protecting these spaces, who are tending to these spaces, many people who are, of course, very low paid, often voluntary. But you also get this other underlying feeling that things are almost constantly at threat, you know, at risk, under threat, under pressure. And I think through being in those spaces and beginning to feel that, and then beginning to meet people like Edward, like Isis, like so many recognizable people in this community, you begin to also realize that you can do something about it. You begin to realize that you can support one another, that you share so many feelings of pain, of anxiety, of distress, of anger. But in that sharing, you begin to build feelings of hope, of enjoyment, of strength, of passion, a sense that you're growing, a sense that you are using your skills and your time to do something that is really, really quite special. We're quite fortunate in North Kensington that we have so many spaces like this and so many groups. So many, you know, I couldn't even hope to list all of them. It's just incredible. But I hope these events over these next few days give a little window into it, into some of the groups and some of the people. I hope that it allows us to network further and continue to connect, and really just to do what we do here in North Kensington, something that's really part of the culture and really clearly in our blood around in this area. And people like Sean who have been welcomed into this area, you know, they bring their same passion, and it seems, you know, we certainly seem to mix a lot of these passionate bloodlines. So look forward to being with you this evening.
Thank you. So obviously we're talking about libraries. We've all said that they're important spaces, and we're talking about the future, reimagining the future. Things are changing. Our world is changing. How I did things when I was a young person many years, over 40 years ago, is not how young people do things now. And we need to think about the future. You know, what do libraries mean? What will they continue to mean? I remember I was very proud when I was in Trinidad and heard that my eldest daughter took part in one of the demonstrations, one of the marches for the library to the town hall. And that made me really proud to know that she understood the value of libraries, of fighting for them to continue. So before I asked the panel to kind of give us a view, an overview that, you know, what are their feelings about the future of libraries, I wanted to just throw out a couple of stats. So I was doing some research, and I mean, this is slightly out of date, as we know, but often these things are. So the census is like 10 years out of date now. 2014 to 15, there was a report, and it was republished in 2017, that said that public libraries in England were visited 225 million times, and that was more than Premier League football games. That they, and the cinema, and it was one of the top 10 tourist attractions, and the top 10 tourist attractions combined, sorry. They describe libraries as trusted free spaces, and we know libraries are spaces of equity. They're where anyone can access information. We know we say knowledge is power. Well, the knowledge that is available in a library is there to provide people with not just sort of learning, but power. It empowers people to be able to access information. And not all people, and we know particularly when research is done that people come from lower income families, impoverished communities, have less access to books in the home, have less access to space in the home. And for them and for their children, the library can be that space. It can be that leveler in terms of challenging some of the disadvantages faced. So libraries are certainly, I feel, very important. There is evidence to show that the government at some point has recognized that libraries are very valuable. Research has shown how they continue to enrich communities. So I think I'll stick to the same policy of starting with Sean and then moving across. So we could hear from our panelists sort of what is imagining the library? What does that mean to you, Sean? Or the future of the library, excuse me.
Future of libraries. So if you'd asked me the same question maybe slightly more than a year ago, maybe 3 years ago or so, before we had this this technological leap that has happened in the past year, I felt that libraries, or a lot of librarians, a lot of people working in the library service, felt very siloed, in that we were working very hard on our own projects in the libraries, and we felt that we weren't really being heard by the rest of the council ourselves. And I think with this new technology, like we use Microsoft Teams in the council, and it just connects us so much more. But we've now managed to connect outside of just our own little bubble of the libraries. We're now connecting with different parts of the council in a much more rounded way. Like we almost feel a bit more of a larger family than what we were before. We're not just our libraries, and we occasionally communicate with other parts of the council. We now can just contact pretty much anyone within our own little council bubble and just find the answers that we need to help improve the residents' lives. Before we were just trying to invite people into ourselves, and now people are recognizing libraries are a great space for connecting with their residents. We had this a little bit when we could do our physical spaces more. We would have we would work with the NHS and have tables and things in the building to catch people passing by. But now we can work together and put on digital events as well, very soon, physical ones, and link the two together. So it's quite exciting. That I'm just very excited to see how this is going to go. Also, I like working with children quite a lot. I feel that children, it's too easy. They're already coming in with schools. We can just catch them at that age, instill that love of reading, and that will grow with them. And then once you get into your 20s, again, 3 years ago, I would have said that. So a lot of the people I spoke to, they might say that the last time they went to the library was when they went to school. And when they start getting into their 20s and later on, the library becomes more of, they're just waiting until they get their own kids, and then they'll come back to the library. And the past year, I've just had so many people telling me about the various library things that they've been getting involved with, whether it's Zoom talks and Zoom events that they've come to, or they've been in their own boroughs, or whether, so I've a few people in my life who are struggling quite with mental issues at this point. It's mental health issues. And they've come to me and told me about the audio books or the e-books that they've been getting from their library services and how it's been helping them. Or through what used to be books on prescription is now reading well. I know exactly what they're about to say when they start telling me about this, because it's things I've been trying to scream and shout about for years. And now this just access to technology has just opened up so many doors that people can get the bits that they need. So if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I wouldn't know exactly what's going to happen. Now I'm very excited for the future. I think that there's just so much potential that we can have with this blended virtual and physical space that just we didn't have before. So that's where I feel in a very roundabout way. But maybe I should hand off to the left again and maybe pass on to Ed and see how for the future.
Thank you, Sean.
Great. Well, yeah, I think before I can go into kind of reimagining the future, I almost want to kind of lay some red lines down of what needs to be in place before we imagine something different. And the reason I say that is standing outside the library with some amazing people, and I suspect some of them are listening to this right now, it had a really profound effect in that ordinarily, if you stand outside the building holding a petition, people will cross the road to avoid you. In the case of North Kensington Library, I can promise you, people crossed the road to come and speak to us and to sign our petition. And speaking to them when they signed our petition, I learned that there was such a deep love for this community space on so many different levels And, maybe we'll have a bit more time to talk about that later on this evening. So it was the building. It was what the building gave you, the position in the street of the building, the fact that, right on the corner of Lancaster Road and Ladbroke Road, acknowledged as the heart of North Kensington, was this amazing building for the public, not private, for the public, with a wonderful semi-regal staircase, amazing light flooding into the large high-ceilinged rooms, a public space, a space where anyone can come, and still to this day, anyone can enter as well, with welcoming, knowledgeable, compassionate staff. You enter the library for a purpose, or maybe not for a purpose. But anyway, what I learned from speaking to people was there were certain things that were really, really valued inside our library. And I would like to suggest we only surrender those things with the explicit permission of the local community. And those things were very simple. They were the books inside the library. They were the ability to come inside the library, find a quiet space and study. So to gain education for themselves. There was a sense of a generational learning that had been gained from that building, from North Kensington Library. And, another very, very important factor is the access to the internet that people gained at the building, and also access to newspapers and magazines. So some of those things sound quite simple, and some of them are a little bit more abstract in actual sense of community that you can get from walking into the building. So before I go imagining anything different, I personally would like to lay down those things almost as red lines that can't be crossed, or if they are crossed, are only done with the permission of the local community.
Thank you. Toby?
Yeah, interesting. I think the future of libraries. I think it's very important what Ed said there, really about really that it's a statutory service, and it's a statutory service for a reason. It's there because we accept in our society that people need a space where they can collectively, freely, openly access knowledge. You simply don't take that away without doing serious damage to society. And I think that that's something that's been lost. The idea of that, and it's somehow been taken over by other priorities that I actually think really degrade our society and degrade our culture. Things like, frankly, war, conflict, arms, certain industries that will never give what libraries and knowledge and understanding can give. So, I think I completely agree with what Ed has said there about, laying down some red lines about, if we're going to have a future of libraries, there has to be a very clear and very strong foundation of what that means and what these spaces mean, because I think it's been clear even from some of the comments online, for instance, in the lead up to this event, that people are fearful, frankly, of a word like reimagine, because words like that have been used time and time again as effectively another way of saying a reduction or a cut. So I think it's really important to lay down those sorts of red lines. I think that the future of libraries, again, touching upon what Ed has said there about access, and this freedom of purpose, you know, to go there with a purpose or to go there with no purpose. That's the point. That's the joy of a library space. And then to touch upon what Sean has mentioned about the digital, you know, I think so many people, especially young people, are finding their way into the digital world, in a sense, precisely because of that, because of access, because it's a space where they can have all the purpose in the world or they can have no purpose, but they can still find their place. And then that would bring me to, I suppose, the last point, which is about the wonder of libraries around intergenerationality, you know, and mixing. You know, these are spaces where you will just find everyone. You will find children, elders, families, single people, people with, you know, incredible ideas, people who, as I said, have no particular idea and are just trying, you know, looking to spend some time or even, you know, waste some time in their day and just relax. And it's actually that complete openness that makes it such a special place. And for me personally, you know, North Kensington Library has not been a library that I've even used that much. I grew up going to Central Library pretty much every week. But I joined Edward in the fight for this library because these are spaces that you'll come into depending on the time in your life. And you've just got to understand that that's just vital for everyone.
So thank you, Toby. So we've heard quite a lot about the different strengths of the library. I think the red lines are really important. I love what Sean was talking about the fact that actually they're even more vital, rather than this idea that maybe sort of digital virtual world will replace them. The libraries are actually more important, you know, health and well-being, mental health, leveling the field to allow access to all, ensuring that there are basic requirements that ensure that our libraries stay where they are. Toby's point as well about fear around language. And of course, we should be fearful because we think about words like regeneration and what that means in reality. It means the destruction of communities, whereas it's pushed as a completely different thing. So yes, we think about reimagining the library. We need to be, in fact, we need red lines around that. That when we talk about reimagining, it does not include certain things. It's very, very clear that it's actually a positive way of refreshing and keeping the library center of the community. I attended a recent consultation on Kensal Library and how they're looking to reimagine, if we want to use that word, its use. And that, what I took away from that was how important the library was to the other people who were engaged in the consultation. 3 other women, and you know, and the one I attended, mothers with children, school age, and how crucial and vital that library provision is for them. A teacher who spoke about using the libraries to visit for children with special education needs, and how, again, how important that is. But I'm wondering if we've got some studio guests behind us in this virtual. I'm just getting used to this virtual thing, okay? So, audience, I'm no pro here. This is very strange for me, actually. I mean, it's lovely to see the library around me because that's a familiar sight. But we've got some guests here, and I'm just wondering if any of our studio guests would like to chip in at this point and add anything to the conversation. Hello, can the studio guests hear?
Hi, this is Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Catherine. Hello, welcome.
I'm on my phone, so I don't have a very good picture, but I'm here. And thank you very much for doing this. I've enjoyed listening to it, and it's good to see you sitting in the library, as you said. I just want to say that, you know, I think what you're talking about and the red lines are absolutely sacrosanct to the council now. Just for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm the Councillor Catherine Folkes, and libraries are in my portfolio. And we've absolutely, a bit like Sean was saying, I've just been, you know, amazed by the transformation that's happened over the last sort of year to 2 years. And, you know, COVID has been absolutely awful for so many people and really devastating. But as you've already discussed, one of the things that's been really positive is this online revolution. And certainly the RBKC library staff have just been astonishing in all the things that they've managed to do. There's a service to help people who are lonely by reading out books and helping them to read along to books. There's the home library service, chatter books for kids, bioepics, and the virtual library talks have been just amazing. When they've had, you know, over 1,000 people at some, from I think the furthest away there was someone from Serbia who's listening into them. So I think the opportunity for libraries to open out and speak sort of nationally and internationally is a really exciting thing that can be developed. And you were just talking about the Kensal Library, Isis, the consultation. I haven't seen actually any of the results from that, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what the community has suggested, what they've come up with. As you say, it's completely community-led, to see if they want to use the space to have something else alongside them in the library, whether it's something to do with the NHS or Citizens Advice Bureau or a library of things, or, you know, all sorts of ideas. We opened this up to hear what people want. So I just want to say I agree, libraries are really important. There are 6 libraries in RBKC, and we will continue to have 6 libraries in RBKC. So thanks very much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to come in and make a comment or ask a question?
Can I just say this is so lovely to see you?
Hello. Do you want to introduce yourself if you want to? It's up to you.
My name is Ilaria, and I'm a long-time resident of the area, and I'm a local artist as well. I know Toby, I know everyone from a long time. Just want to say, oh, this is so cute to see you. It's amazing. Well done. Fantastic. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Ilaria. Jacob, I can see you're there. I just wondered if you had anything that you wanted to add. You're obviously one of the organisers of these events. Okay. Is that your microphone turning on, Jacob, or is
It was, yes. I think.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Jacob. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you there in the library. I think I've got some. Okay. Yeah, lovely to see you in the library. That's what it's all about. And yes, I would like to respond to Catherine Fawkes. I suppose whenever we hear about consultation on the space, it's quite traumatic. It's quite worrying, and you know, I suppose we'd be interested in sort of opening out into more public space and broadening out rather than sort of consolidating. I mean, you know, there's financial, you know, concerns that the council may have and that we don't know about, but there's a lot of trying to refigure out what to do with, say, some public land, but not really so much of like expanding, broadening and developing public space, creating more public space. It's sort of consolidating. But yeah, so I would worry also about the term reimagining, because I think that we did do such a fight, you know, to save our library and then to invest in the library and bring it, you know, and make it brilliant again, because I think that Sean inherited something that wasn't quite, you know, where it should be. And I did a lot of work with Sean, and I did get a feeling that you know, he was doing like, you know, free people's jobs, and yes, we love him, and we were very sad to see him go. And there's rumors he might come back, and that would be great. But yeah, so we are very much, I think, as Ed said, is that we want to see the library shine in all its glory, you know, and then maybe, you know, because there's a lot of running things down and then saying, oh well, they're not fit for purpose, you know, and there's that sort of, well, you know, let's see what we can do with the space. I know there's a lot of stuff that's still, there's the mezzanine, and I think this is all about, you know, acknowledging, you know, how broad the library is to us, and how it can serve us, and it is there to serve us. It's just like how we want it to serve us, I suppose. And in what are our needs, what are our current needs at this current time, and you know, and space, and a quiet space, friendly librarian, you know, and some nice books, you know, and this time is much needed, you know. So I have been enjoyed. Obviously, yes, COVID did change everything, because we had lots of plans to do our events physically in the building, and this is we've had to adapt, and we've raced to it with the assistance of Nick in the background, and you know, his technical abilities, and you know, we're adapting, but yeah, I think I think, you know, there are concerns about consultation. It does, for me, it's very triggering and concerning. So
yeah. Thank you, Jacob. So I was wondering, before we continue the conversation, I know some, did you have a presentation or a basic slideshow or some photographs or something that you wanted to show, Sean?
Yes. I'm also dying to reimagining. There's been quite a few, especially when you were saying about, I think Toby, you were saying in the lead up to this, there were a few concerns about the word reimagining when it comes to libraries, and up until now I hadn't actually realized that there could have been a negative connotation to it. I've just been quite inspired and encouraged by this potential that we have now, because for me, I'm not seeing anything going away from the library service. It's a buzzword that we keep using in the council. We keep talking about value added, and everything we're doing now is how we can add value onto the already existing service. So for me, I don't see anything going away. And with Kensal, with the consultation, if anyone is out there, if anyone sees this, please, you can email in still. If you do libraries at rbkc.gov.uk, just tag the Kensal project. We can get your input in there. Again, the library isn't going to go away. The library is still going to be there. When I was at North Kensington, I also looked after Kensal Library. Unfortunately, there was a fire that happened in one of the rooms. That was all sorted, and now the room looks better than ever, looks nice and new. And there's another little room that's next to it. Just again, it's the value added onto what we can use these rooms for and what the space is. The library upstairs is not going away. Just wanted to get that out there as well. Cool.
Okay.
Yes, I've got slides that I just really wanted to show off some of the things that have been happening. I have moved back to RBKC. I'm not in Westminster, which is where I was seconded for a year, but I'm now the virtual manager. So these images might be quite small, but I'm just showing off at the moment our social media, our website, and a few of our events that we've been putting on. So it might be a bit too small to see there, but we've got our handles and things like that. If you could go to the next slide, and from this point on, I will name an animal to show the next slide, since I don't want to keep something there. So that's my system.
5 pounds in the jar, Sean, sorry.
Did I use the wrong? I tried to avoid it, and I still said the
Every
wrong,
time you say
wrong.
next slide, please, it's 5 pounds in the charity jar tonight, everybody. Sorry about
That's
that.
fine. Well, I might say it constantly then, just to get some. But I'll say an animal if I want to go to the next slide. So these are this is what we've defined as our purpose for the libraries: read, learn, connect, helping people to read, learn, and connect. as well as our core offers of children's and health and wellbeing. And also we've almost digitized the old, more traditional library inquiries line of thinking. Antelope. So Read is what I consider to be our digital bookshelf. So for example, on screen, I've got a few short reviews which go out on our social media. We've also got some blog posts which collected all the requested books that happened over 2020 and put them into a top 10 list. Badger. As Councillor Folks mentioned, we've got our podcast, which is starting from the Central Library. We've got a biography collection there, and Claudia and some special guests every month talk about one or a few of the things from our biography store, which has got thousands of books in there. And on the right-hand side, this is an example of how global we are. And I know Councillor Folks said about Serbia. That was one of our events. We did some virtual tours. But we've had people coming in from across from America, from Russia, and we had Heather Morris from New Zealand in one of our events. So we really have gone global this year. Cats. We've also been really looking at our online stock. So we've got our ebooks and we've got our physical books which people can request. And we've made it so that as new stock gets added and is available to be borrowed, it gets put onto our catalogue, so you can request them. And on the right-hand side, this is where staff have, we regularly meet once a month to look at what we can add to our e-catalogue. And that is all curated by staff. So we've really upped our involvement. Before it was all emails and having to go into actual meetings. Now we can just join these focus groups, task and finish groups as we call them, and get everything done. Dolphin. This is our Learn. So part of Read, then we've got our Learn. This is where we have what we've been doing, online talk, trying to educate and teach about the resources that we've got. And also we put things on our blog that the staff collate. Elephant. And the final of our three main purposes is our Connect. So this is where we actually connect with people. So for example, we've got our reading groups that go on. We've recently partnered with our Playlist for Life, which helps people with dementia. Goat, skip F, can't think of an F right now. North Kensington, James and Diane, they've recently started a new Aloud in the Cloud group. We had one in Westminster, now we've got another one in North Kensington. We're also opening up a Bengali speaking group one for around Church Street Library. It's where people can get together and they don't need to read a specific book. It's just coming together and shared reading. It's more for sharing and battling isolation, which is something very dear to my heart. Giraffe, I'm going to do another G. I realise I'm going through these quite slowly, so I might try and speed up. Another thing which went online this year was our children's activities. So we had our baby rhyme times, our craft events, our chatterbooks, they all went online. Said giraffe, haven't I? Stuck on animals. Lemur, I'll go to L. And we have also recently started up 2 new activities after school clubs. We feel that with kids, especially when they were learning all online in an environment, school environment, they didn't have that social environment. So we created after school clubs, about books, creative things. We also started putting things onto a new YouTube, so we're more Gorilla. Let's keep doing G's. Not that many G's. Another of our core offers, health and wellbeing. We've always worked quite closely with health-related things. Dolphin, again. I've forgotten all of my animals, just being put on the spot. This is something that's happening in Easter as part of, well, just to begin, sorry, about a third of the students in RBKC are on free school meals. So this is what we can do to try and help and assist with there. So throughout Easter, every day we're doing 4 hours of online activity, as well as a lunch box or a free food box. For anyone who's, well, actually anyone, but especially for people on free school meals, part of the holidays and food activities and food program. But lastly, final bit is just our digital. I've already really summed it up. We put all our information inquiries lines online as well, so people can email us, tweet us, everything, and you can get to a librarian. And we put all our key announcements out online as we have been. And that's everything I wanted to show you for our virtual service. So yes, thank you. That's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Sean. I love the animal names. So I think
I forgot what the.
Sorry.
I thought I could do it, and then I blanked on all my animals. So.
Oh, it was a good selection. I like the fact you had a lemur in there. So we're going to go back to Ed and Toby, but I think, is Sharifa in the room?
Yes, hold on.
If you could let her in. We're going to have a little bit of poetry, and I'll ask Sharifa to introduce herself. And of course, she has a connection to the libraries as well.
Hey everyone, am I in now?
Stand by, please, just a second.
Okay, thank you. And please, just to anyone who's watching, send your comments in. We want to hear from you. If you've got anything to say, we'll try our best to respond. We don't have all the answers, but we have our own answers. We have some answers. So, you know, please, this is interactive. We want to hear from anyone listening. You're part of this. This is all about you. This is not about us guys here. It's actually about the community and hearing your voices and your wishes, your views. And, you know, if you hate the word reimagining, tell us. What would you prefer us to say about the library? You know? But let me hand over to Sharifa Energy, who is a young poet. She's not as young as she used to be, but she's quite an acclaimed poet, and she's done a lot of work in North Kensington. And she will introduce herself. Sharifa.
Sharifa, sorry, can you turn your phone sideways for us, do you think?
That's okay.
I quite like it lengthways.
1 moment.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Hi, Sharifa. Can you hear us?
Yeah, 1 moment. I'm just trying to balance it on some books then. 1 second. I'm like, the whole camera thing's gone wrong now.
I can't hear her, Nick. Sharifa, can you hear us? Yeah, okay,
I can
cool.
hear you.
Okay, great. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, so Sharifa Energy, as some of you may know, but yeah, just my connection with the library is as residents for in Norfolk Library for the Spine Festival for 2018, 2019, and yeah, just and the things that I find really interesting and important about some of the work that's taken place at North Kensington Library is just a lot of the intergenerational work that was going on at the time when I was involved as well. And I just find that the library is such a safe space for so many people, so many young people that don't normally have access to like maybe even school or some of the youth clubs in the area, you know, migrant communities who may move into the area as well. And it was quite interesting, just some of the conversations that came out of it. Sean will be quite aware of some of this. And even just having the capacity and having the introduction to some vulnerable young people to be able to continue to support them who only really visited the library. And for me, like, I've been involved in so many conversations around decolonizing the curriculum and so many different things. So for me, I feel like North Kensington Library is one of the libraries that would be leading on things like this when it comes to bringing truth to light. And that's something that the local community feel really passionate about. And I feel like North Kensington Library is a great starting point in so many ways for so many conversations. Whether it's about history, international history, or history of the people within the community. And yeah, I just think it's been really amazing how we've been able to have open mics within the library as well, allow people to have the space to speak their truth, and, you know, from children to adults. And like young people attending workshops with their parents and getting their parents involved as well, and parents being able to give their perspective of like migrating to this community, and like just even using like photography within the library. That was really quite interesting. But yeah, I'm gonna share with you all, and it's just about some of the frustrations as a teenage migrant young woman, young girl at the time, and how I feel not having access to certain conversations earlier on can be quite detrimental to like understanding the world as it is today. But I trust that like in North Kensington to be a place where it's safe for young people to have these conversations. So yeah. So this piece is called Thomas Cook. I see the beauty through the flames of the hell that we're living in. I know my test is to be mentally and spiritually strong, though they try to entrap people physically, a psychological bully. But I know I've got to strengthen my spirit in preparation for dark times, because we only live once on this earth in our lifeline. But I'm not blind to the reality and negative energies they boil. So I stay awake, sewing together my spiritual shield. Many spirits are judging, but me, they're not fooling. I see the truth evil breathed, because truth can be very overwhelming. Feel the critique, way they present Thomas Cook magazine, sun hat, suntans, brown sand and sunscreen, slacking around on our holidays, not knowing in Australia there was a mass grave, in Rottnest Island a mass concentration camp. But they only tell us what they need to get tourism stamps. Guys have told, but I don't buy it. I've been to Toronto, but no mention of the Indigenous man. And when I went to France to visit Disneyland, only a teenager posted pictures with an army man. But if school had shown me in the history plan the truth of France's plunder and their bloody hands, if school had shown me the Battle of Algiers, then I would have been more astute than an army fan. But they glossed over Europe's colonial past and made me feel wrongly frustrated in my history class. I always knew something wasn't right, but I didn't quite buy the story of being simply an economic migrant's child. A confused diaspora, stuck in a trio of identities, Muslim, British, Indian, pulled in different directions like curious elasticity. Where do I go? Who am I? Where am I supposed? They made me feel inferior, so I below my A's facing my GCSEs. I come from a great culture of old civilizations and illiterate. Poetry is in my veins and a melody on my father's old Hindi cassettes. So I choose to express and not let the fire burn in my chest. I set my paper alight with my pen, notebook and microphone, my closest friends. History is ongoing, it doesn't stay in the past tense. They denying Caribbean islands reparations. There's no blur in my lens. I told Thomas Cook to cook up a new tourism guide, not one to ogle at Indigenous people, but with truth to confide. I don't want to be blind like the shock on tourist faces when witnessing steam bags in Victoria, expecting any shopping and daisies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharifa. So, yes, taking on board everything that's been said, Sean's presentation about some of the things that are happening. I think, you know, Sharifa's mention of decolonizing, which is really about, throwing off the shackles of old and actually trying to move forward with a positive experience for those who have been colonized, who've been the victims of colonization, and also about reparations. It's about repairing the damage that's been done. Obviously, we have had a lot of damage done to our community in North Kensington, and the loss of this library would have been horrendous. I mean, it would have been what would I say, would have been the sort of thing we wouldn't have come back from in many ways, I think, if we'd have lost North Kensington Library. It would have been a huge loss. So in terms of reparations, in terms of repair, and thinking about the future of the library, whether or not we use the word reimagining or whether we just talk about the future of the library. Now you've spoken about your red lines, Ed. Where do you think the future of the library is?
So it was very interesting listening to Jacob and the problems we even have around this word consultation, and then you get, you know, this brilliant presentation that shows what possibilities there are for the future and what true genuine added value or value added, I can't remember which way round that was described, could bring in many, many ways and in many, many things. So for me, I think, you know, if we were confident, and it'd probably take many more years to rebuild this trust, that in fact we could be safe in knowing that we will have statutory services backing and providing libraries for the future. And it's quite interesting that I know that we have Stephanie from Kensal Rise as a guest this evening. Kensal Rise were an amazing support to us during our struggle. They gave us plenty of advice and support, particularly advice around legal avenues that we could pursue. But Kensal Rise is self-funded. It's run by volunteers, and it's not a model that they want. They want to be back in statutory hands. So I would start off my conversation by saying, if all of that was guaranteed, and we were safe in the knowledge of having all of the services that I mentioned before, and if the day ever came that those weren't necessary, then that's another conversation to have. Then I think that the idea of reimagining your library becomes something really exciting and, you know, a real challenge. And I throw the challenge out there to people listening and watching this evening to come up with ideas. For me, it would always revolve around the core of community. And so everything that, you know, like if you've got the council guaranteeing ongoing funding and services, that would be an amazing thing for the community to know. And in fact, they could probably do more good by guaranteeing that funding than they could in many other of the things that they do or think that it would be good for them to do. But look, for me, it's all around enhancing community experience. That doesn't just mean laying on, you know, health events. It's trying to find ways to maybe reach out to sort of people who feel a bit more disenfranchised, who maybe have not felt of libraries as somewhere that they would naturally come into. So maybe putting on some events that people who possibly would not normally enter into a library would enter into a library. And I think Sharifa knows that very well. She did many events where she connected with people who probably would never dream of even going into a library, and they came out young poets at the end of it all. So that would be what I have to say about that, Isis.
Thank you, Ed. And just picking up on your point about community-led libraries, apparently there are over 170 of them now in the UK. And it was interesting, yes, because when we spoke to Kensal Rise Library, the member who was going to be on the panel, she was very clear that libraries should be run by the statutory service. Mm-hmm. And we have to be careful. In terms of red lines, I would say that's definitely a red line, that our public libraries are public service, and it should be provided by the statutory provider. Funding should always be made available for libraries. And it's interesting talking about the different types of things that could also happen in libraries. I'm coming to Toby now. Toby is many things. He does so many things in our community, you know. And one of those things is that Toby is an artist. That's how I first met you, Toby. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the arts and cultural landscape, where do you see libraries fitting in?
I mean, I think in a sense, I'd like to take that question kind of back to something that Ed said here, which is because it's for me, it's about stability. You know, there's a real issue here, and I think it's endemic in this country actually, and it's something that people need to start getting a grip of, because there's just this enormous instability in this country that I think kind of comes back to this issue of coloniality. It comes back to this issue of dispossession that has taken place in this country. And when we talk about decoloniality, we're certainly not talking about black and white, because we're going right back to the enclosures. We're talking about people who've had their land stolen from them in Scotland, in Ireland, across England, across North England, etc. So, this issue that this great instability has been has been landed on the people of this country through colonialism, through just incredibly harsh versions of capitalism. And so then, you know, you have arts kind of coming in there. For me, arts becomes it becomes a decoration on top of that, really. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I became a community artist. It was the reason why a number of years ago I made a clear decision to call myself a community artist and a community designer, because I believe in design and art that does something, that has a chance of addressing these issues, and it kind of fundamentally grapples with these issues whilst actually creating things. Because otherwise, I believe art becomes, as I say, it becomes a decoration, it becomes a bauble, it becomes, if anything, it becomes a tool for the very colonialist mindset that has caused a lot of this problem in the first place. And when we look at, you know, across the world, when we look at a lot of, for instance, Pacific Island art, or art of, you know, various African cultures, you know, you'll see a lot of art that does something, that actually achieves something, that is about creating spaces in which people come into and do things. And that's where I think that, you know, there's something to be said with libraries about how maybe we could look at some of those, you know, pre-colonial ways of using art in spaces. And I'd particularly point towards, for instance, as I say, like the Pacific Islanders and Maori peoples who create incredible spaces to bring people together, basically. And you can imagine how much that actually comes down to their culture, their spirit, everything that is within them. And I think if I then reflect back onto the Friends of North Kensington Library and the campaign and North Kensington, for me, that's what comes out of North Kensington. It is this constantly decolonial, you know, kind of post-colonial, anti-racist, you know, kind of class deconstruction that it is just within us, that you cannot escape if you're, you know, engaged in this area. And I think it will never die in this area. And who knows where we'll take it, but I do think the libraries have to be at the center of that.
Yes, thank you, Toby. And that image that we've got up at the moment is of some of the local social history books that we have in the library. And I know Sean and I were looking at extending the social history section in North Kensington. Coming back to what you're talking about, Toby, about history of anti-racist activism, decolonizing, these are all part and parcel of the history of North Kensington, the history of a community that's always been diverse. It's always been made up of people who've come in, often people seeking refuge, coming to a place that became a safe space from which to build and develop and become part of the wider community. And that's happened really well over the years. It's, you know, it's interesting, whenever I talk about North Kensington and our local history, I always talk about the 1958 so-called race riots, when there was the uprising of the African Caribbean community against a lot of the oppression and the racist issues that they were facing as the, you know, newly arrived, I'd say in the last sort of 10 years, migrants to the UK. And that story, that history of rioting, so-called, I would say it's kind of like an uprising that happened in North Kensington, really helped to consolidate a lot of the community in North Kensington in a way that it didn't happen in many other places. The murder of Kelso Cochrane on the 17th of May 1959 on Galway Road and Southam Street led to, out of that horrible situation, we see Kelso's funeral on Ladbroke Grove, where you see one of the largest funerals ever. And it's a very, very diverse funeral. There are lots of different people there. And it made people think about the history of who they are and trying to come together overcome some of the issues. So we have had this history in North Kensington for many years. Wondering if there's anyone else in the studio that wanted to chip in, because this is, I mean, I'm not sure actually how this works. If normally people put their hands up, and I don't know, I can't see if people's hands are up, and I don't know if anybody wanted to contribute anything. I don't want us to just be monopolizing all the space.
Jacob?
Hi there. Yes, I have got my hands up. And we'll note that Isis, the host, could not see my hand for our next.
Oh, I can now. Sorry, now that I've leaned forward, I can see a little yellow dot. Yeah, but it's really small.
I'm gonna bounce back to what Ed was saying, and I must say, Nick, I do appreciate when I can see all the friends. I don't want to. I shouldn't direct you. You are brilliant. Bounce back to what Ed was saying, and then also reimagining. I mean, and then this thing of trust when we talk about consultation, and I think that when anything new is about to happen, and it's the trust, it's the council that are leading it. There is a lot of worry, and I think right at the moment we are at a time when there's so much change and there's so much sort of promise and there's so much engagement, but there is so much overwhelming where the council is saying, yes, we want you to be involved, we want you to be involved, and it's resulted in like so many meetings and so many sort of engagements where actually it becomes impossible to sort of we're overwhelmed with the amount of but still I would say that it's the same whether it's our library or it's our playground, whether it's Powis Square or our homes. I think it's the same. What we need to get right is that we need to have some people that are the decision makers involved, and they need to be facilitated in enabling them to be involved. And I know the trust is doing that. I've been on the panel. I've been in the process to select the chair, which is happens to be sitting in the library right now with you. And the process, I must say, Catherine, if you're still there, or any other council, it was one experience through the last 3 or 4 years where I felt I wasn't fighting, I was being supported, and I felt sort of empowered. I felt like I was appreciated, and that I felt that I was working with a very powerful organization, and that what I was saying, what I was doing was really going to have like a big effect. And I was so very paranoid when I went in. I was completely distrusting of the trust at that time. And I was so paranoid. I probably was overreacting. And actually, everyone, we all sort of came to the same conclusion. And my paranoia maybe wasn't completely justified, but I mean, in some respects, we are very, very concerned when anything that the council's proposing. And so reimagining, whether it's our space, any space. So I think the trust is, pioneering. They're doing a lot of work where they're bringing people in to have the decision-making power, and they're facilitating those people to do so. So they're not just saying, hey, look, come to 1,000 meetings a week, and you can have your say. When am I going to I haven't got time to get to those meetings. And there's so many important meetings, whether it's our trees, our houses, our libraries, our youth clubs, I'll be stretched into, a little thin piece of, I don't know, I'll just be stretched beyond recognition. And so I think, it's about, I think the council, if we're reimagining, if we're doing anything, you need to have, whether it's, the decision makers, you need to step back, the council needs to step back, and they need to open up these spaces for community members and support them. And like Isis was saying about, you know, utilizing this engagement, because there's a lot of people engaged because we've had to. We're only doing, we've done what we've done because we felt we had to, because it was, you know, we were in a very, very awful situation. So whether it's Westway 23, the library, these are things that came out of desperation. They came out of, you know, very, very difficult circumstances, but there's good that has come out of them, and we're trying to work and develop on those, you know, the connections that we've made and rebuild with the council. Yes, you know, and with all members of the council, but we you know, I think Toby's mentioning, you know, the colonization, we are dealing with that. You know, that's what we found ourselves growing up in, and so it's very difficult. But so opening up those spaces and empowering people, giving them the decision making, making sure that the planning is democratic. It's not all done by people in the south. And Catherine is very good at talking, and you know, she's brilliant. She sounds brilliant. And a lot of the councillors sound brilliant. But if you look at it, you know, we're still relying on their sort of goodwill, and that just, you know, you could unless you switch off, you know, you can lose sleep over it. So you know, I think we are quite radical, and we have high demands, and I think not really high demands, but they seem like high demands, and I think that needs to be recognized, that we're you know, people like Ed, Toby, I might say, you know, and a lot of in the community, we've got very, very high expectations in that, you know, they're not really high, but they are high in that where we feel we are, I think. So
okay, so maybe it's about relabeling our expectations and just saying,
and it does feel like we are still fighting a lot and not working together. There's still a lot of fighting. So I hope that hasn't gone drift for the library, but
can I ask,
yeah, I don't think we're asking for that much.
Sorry, I was just going to say, before we move back to the panel, because I think there's some interesting points that have come up there, and particularly around the role of us as community and how far that should extend, our expectations. It was interesting questioning whether they were high or not. But I've noticed on the screen that I'm watching my phone at the same time as watching this, that some comments were coming up, and I can't read them. If I touch my phone, it stops. And I'm wondering, Nick, if you could assist me. Did we have some comments that came in that we could respond to, or rather the panel could respond to?
Absolutely. So
I think
we've got a Facebook user who is either choosing to be anonymous or hasn't ticked the box enabling their name to come out, which is fine.
That's fine. Just know the comments. Yeah,
absolutely. I'd love to hear from Stephanie and Kensal experience. Well, obviously, you can answer that one, Isis. And also, they've said the point about finding a word different to reimagine or reimagining, given fear of certain words. Maybe when we can come together again, perhaps through an art workshop or similar, an alternative can be found.
Okay, well, before we go back to talking about our role as community in steering the library, or maybe even wider than that, is there anyone on the panel who wants to just address this point that was raised about the language, about reimagining and what that should mean? You know, also following on from what Jacob was saying about the trauma associated with consultation. Also, Ed, you mentioned consultation.
Look, I'd be happy to say a few words, and you know, it's quite a difficult thing to get your head around. But the truth of it is that we're never, as a community, probably ever going to have another opportunity to have the council kind of listen to us as they might listen to us now, and then everyone will react to that in their own individual way, and that's, you know, that's absolutely fine. But, you know, the fact is something so tragic and so terrible happened that, you know, this council has had had to change, or again, I know that even that in itself is controversial. But what I'm trying to say is that, you know, if there are opportunities out there, then as a community we should take those opportunities. And I don't know whether those opportunities are totally out there. I know that there is still a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt, but it does sometimes strike me that after what has happened, you know, look, we've got our library back. You know, that wouldn't have happened without Grenfell. That was a decision made by the council and the Notting Hill Prep School. You know, if we push, and we're a great community at pushing, we can get some of this stuff. And we never, ever, ever would have got it before the 14th of June 2017. So I guess what I'm thinking, and I haven't thought it through really properly, is that, you know, like it, you know, for me, even the word consultation is just such a, it's such a negative, you know, it's like they're coming to us with an idea that they're going to impose on us. And this consultation is just about running it past us before it's imposed on us. And, you know, that will always be a fear of mine. But, you know, maybe good things can happen. Maybe there are some good things that can happen. And I've become quite a pragmatist as I've got older. I don't think you get everything that you want all of the time, but I think it would be a shame if we lost out on getting some of the stuff that we could got if we don't kind of try and get it. So I haven't explained that very well, and it's quite controversial because a lot of people, and I completely understand, and I lived in Grenfell Tower, don't trust this council, don't think good things can happen with them, don't think they've changed. And, you know, I totally respect that opinion. I guess what I'm trying to say is that maybe there is a way that we can go a little bit to get a little bit from them that we probably wouldn't have got before Grenfell.
Thank you, Ed. I mean, Toby, I'm just thinking, because, you know, language, the point about reimagining, is there a better way to talk about the future of libraries? When we planned this event, the idea of reimagining, I think, came out of language that's throwing around, but actually it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic what this use of this word has thrown up here. Because for me, it's really, you know, it's crystallized the root of the problem, the root of the issue. The issue is that words do not exist in a vacuum. Words exist in a context. Words exist in an historical context. They exist in an historical reality where myself as an artist and designer, for instance, can look at the word reimagining and think, you know, all sorts of, you know, flights of fantasy, and that's fine. But as a member of the North Kensington community, that word, you know, triggers concerns around, as I said, actually a cloaked, a kind of thinly veiled threat of reduction and cuts and removal of services. Consultation is even worse. Consultation is a word that has been used similar to actually another word, viability. You know, these words have been used particularly by the council really in order to carry out their systemic, you know, I kind of struggle even to, you know, abuse, frankly. You know, you get to a point of abuse with some of these decisions. And I think actually if we look at, for instance, the 2-2 review, the independent review into institutional racism, into Westway Trust, which for 50 years was an organisation that was effectively controlled by the council. If we look at the recent Kroll reports that make very clear that the council's main focus was on money, was on viability, financial viability, rather than social concern and social support for the residents, you can see very clearly the context in which words like reimagine, regeneration, consultation actually sit. And when you then reflect, for instance, as a black person or as a brown person, as a minoritized ethnic person, or as a person from the lower financial economic classes, you'll probably recognize some of these things quite well. You'll recognize that words that might fly over many other people's heads and be completely dismissed and not really given a second thought actually hit home very hard. And so actually, if we, for instance, to reflect on obviously one of the biggest talking points of the day at the moment around this issue around the color of a certain child, you realize that that conversation and that statement may mean very little to many people out there, but to a group of people who have been systemically abused and degraded for hundreds of years, that conversation and that comment actually brings up trauma and pain and a reminder of where you sit in society. And that is what consultations, and I think that is certainly what Jacob has touched upon here, that when you're brought into these spaces of consultation, very quickly you're reminded of your place. And what we've been trying to do, get our heads around at Westway Trust, is how do you break that? How do you actually create spaces where people come in and don't feel that way? And I think, again, that's back to a lot of the stuff that Sean is doing and some of his presentation. That's a battle for them. That's a struggle for them. That's the work that they have to do to make communities feel loved, appreciated, exactly as he said, connected with. This is really the work of the day. So yeah, I think we all need to reflect on this language and the context it sits within, and we need to continue to take this to the council.
Thank you. So whilst you were talking, you and Ed, I saw something flash up. I had to go to our secret man, Nick, and it was a question put for both Sean and Catherine about the library, but like I say, I can't read it. Are you able to catch that message and read it out, Nick?
I did WhatsApp it to you, Isis, but not to worry.
Okay. Well, if you've WhatsApp, okay. So this is real high tech. Okay, so we had right. Christopher Bushell. He said it was good to see all of us. And could Sean or Catherine? Unfortunately, Catherine's also sent a message, hasn't she, saying she's had to leave, to light a candle for Sarah and her family. So, Sean, it's down to you. So Christopher Bushell is asking, could you address why Kensington and Chelsea newsletter never informs or promotes these events? And this has been a problem since the successful outcome of the campaign. So yeah, since we're doing all these events, why isn't it being reflected in the newsletter? I don't know what your involvement is with that, Sean.
It's not a very exciting answer actually. It's an internal. The newsletters are internal bits. I would have thought that we would have been tweeting and retweeting the posts that were made from the Friends of North Kensington group. No, I suppose that's all.
There have been some shares.
Okay,
I think there's shared on Facebook. I did see at least one share on Facebook, to give you a little credit.
Was that the RBKC Facebook?
I think it was the RBKC Libraries Facebook did share something at the very beginning. But yeah, I would say that it's, we all know the way social media works, and sharing something once isn't really all that good for an institution. You should be sharing and sharing and sharing and trying to generate.
Well, I think it's the point. It's the Kensington and Chelsea news that if you're a resident, we all get it through our door. So the point is, if that were a way to share information, it would obviously be much wider. The circulation be much wider, and allow for the residents to engage in what's going on much more so than perhaps is happening otherwise. I had another question which came in, and I was thinking actually of maybe framing it slightly differently. So the Facebook users asked about hearing from, I mentioned it, Stephanie and Kensal, the Kensal Rise experience. Now, obviously, we don't have anyone from Kensal Rise here. I know Ed at the beginning explained a little bit about how Kensal Rise was very much supporting and had a very kind of role in kind of solidarity role with the campaign at North Kensington. But I'm just wondering, so Kensal Rise is a community-run library. We've already touched on the fact that we think libraries should be run as statutory provision and funded by our local council. But for you, Sean, as a librarian who is funded and a part of a statutory library service, I mean, how do you feel about a community library? I mean, what do you think is the essential difference between what you're doing and what the community libraries are doing, if any at all?
I want to recognise that community libraries are still, they're doing the best that they can and they're still holding on. It's not the ideal. I would much rather all of them are part of the statutory service, but at least some way the voluntary side of it can keep that open. I'm hoping that that in some way can come back in the future. If the library has gone community, then I'm hoping that at some point they can get re-brought back into the fold. How I like to see that we use volunteers is to educate and empower people. So if someone hasn't got the skills that they need, we can provide these spaces for them to get DBS checks and things like that, so we can get them involved in the process, and then so they can help run some of the sessions that we have with library support, but not to take over those services, but to, well, some of it's like Duke of Edinburgh students, so we work quite closely with schools to get students in to do part of the voluntary side of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, and other parts of it would be like the adult education side. We get people in to upskill them into, well, either it's running sessions or now it would probably be more like how you can get the digital side of things. I can run sessions and have breakout rooms, those bits. But that isn't so that we can have these taken over by volunteers. It's so that they can go on and get skills so they can go off into the workforce or grow older and have something for their applications. Yeah, I don't really know how it would go for the future to bring community libraries back into the fold, but I just want to say that I don't agree with them being taken out of the statutory funding. It's not something I really like to see. Sorry, as I said at the beginning with Lewisham, I got the numbers wrong. It was 12 that dropped down to 7 libraries, but the 5 of them were turned into community libraries. So I lived through a little bit of the experience for seeing what happened to those libraries themselves. And what I would go back to Ed when Ed brought up about the community in the library. I think that is the best way to safeguard people, safeguard that library and that community. And we've seen through the network from Friends of North Kensington how it can work with the council, through the library service, through the councillors, through that network, and to strengthen it. If you're listening in or watching in and you are not part of your library's community, the best way is to see if there is a friends group, if there are interested people who can band with you, because that's the way that you can get a dialogue between the community, the library, and then the council to try and make sure that they know the importance of how you feel about your local library.
Thank you. So we also had a message from Eve Weatherburn, who was talking about building trust through being really clear what is advisory and what's really up to us. And I think that was in relation to the conversation that started around, you know, how much should it be us that's like leading on the whole role of libraries, on how libraries, the future of libraries really. I mean, if we're going to use this word reimagining, and as we've recognized, there are words now that are quite traumatic. There are words that they're almost like doublespeak. They're not trusted by community members because of the history of what's been done to us. But if we are to reclaim language, if we to use language and feel comfortable with it, and the word reimagining were to be an honest, trustworthy representation of looking at how the future of libraries would work, what would need to happen to build the trust of our community, and for us to be really clear about exactly, you know, what we could and could not do. I mean, coming back also to what you were saying, Ed, about being pragmatic.
So from my perspective, I mean, it's going to take a lot of time, and we've had 4 years since or just nearly 4 years since what happened. You know, it may be another 14 or 40 years before trust is rebuilt. But it's not us that need to. It's not us that need to be putting those building blocks there. It's the council that needs to demonstrate to the community that we, you know, and in the case of the libraries, the funding is there, the commitment is there, the statutory service is there for us. They respect librarians. They respect the role that librarians play, and then we can have a totally different conversation about what it is that we would really like to see inside the spaces. So with Kensal Rise, this idea that a community group may be involved with the future running of the library, on one hand could be a brilliant idea, but to me it just worries me because I think it's just a step down the road towards a community library, and that's because of the lack of trust. So look, it's about building that trust, which is going to take a very, very long time. But if that trust was there, and it's only the council that can put those building blocks in, and I've just explained how they can do that by, you know, a long-term commitment to our library service in this borough. And as people that love our libraries, have loved libraries all of our lives from the conversations that we've had earlier, you know, that is something that we really welcome. I do truly believe also it would be a very good way of them demonstrating that they care about the community, because I think that the libraries and the library that we have in North Kensington, in Kensal, really demonstrate what a community is about. And, you know, I know that firsthand because standing outside the library, like I said, with many, many other people, there was no better kind of market testing than listening to people's conversations about what a building and what a service has done for them through the generations. So if we were assured of that, I think that we can have a totally different conversation. And I don't really think it matters what word we use to describe how we're going to move forward. It would be exciting. It would be, you know, a lot of the stuff that, you know, we've been shown this evening is really exciting. You know, some of the ideas that we could bring in. But for me, like, it's just unfortunate that we have to start with red lines, guarantees of funding, you know, the same old mantra. So, yeah, I guess that's my take on it.
Thank you. And Toby, I mean, not only are we sort of picking up on what Ed's just been talking about, but you have just been very closely involved in a process of almost reimagining or transforming or re-narrating how an organization works with a community. I mean, are there any lessons that RBKC could learn about how involved and how, you know, I mean, we're not going to use the word consultation, but maybe we talk about co-design, or we talk about sharing decision-making for our library service?
Yeah, I mean, you know, where we are at the Westway Trust is very much at the very, very beginning of a process that is realistically going to take many years, precisely because of what's just been said here about rebuilding trust, you know, rebuilding systems, rebuilding behaviors, practices. It's an enormous thing. And believe me, being in it every day, yeah, you know, you really begin to see that. And I'm sure Ed, you know, in his role with Grenfell United, knows full well, you know, when you kind of get a peek behind the door, as it were, when you get a peek into the system, your first reaction, in a sense, is like, whoa, hang on a second, this is big. This is an intense thing that we're taking on. You know, even on a far smaller level with Westway Trust, it's still intense and immense. But yeah, I would come back to this issue of trust, building trust, and also power. A lot of this is about power. Decision making is about power. Consultations sit very low down in terms of power and decision making, very low. In essence, they're outside the power dynamic. They're outside the decision making process. It is a tokenistic gesture to those people who will deal with the consequences of a decision, that they're given this token to interact sort of lightly around the edges of what will be the end result. It's not real decision making. It's not real delegation of power. It's not really trusting your community or engaging your community or valuing your community's expertise or experience. It is tokenistic. It's as simple as that. So if we're actually to move forward from this space, one has to begin to look at far more real steps of power and towards real decision making, including delegated decisions, true partnerships, beyond advisories and into real places where people are making these decisions. I mean, I just reflect on this idea of the culture of North Kensington that for so long has been all about campaigning. Why? Because we get to these moments of desperation where decisions have been out of our hands and there's nothing left to do, because the only place you had to feed into a decision was a consultation, and nobody had any trust for that consultation. So then the decision actually goes forward to a point where the community is horrified and a campaign begins. And this is the cycle that we've been in. And as yet, I'm afraid to say, despite the horrors of Grenfell, despite a lot of the talk of change, I'm not seeing the systemic changes, the systemic moves that are necessary to really pull us out of that cycle of empty consultation, non-real participatory decision-making processes, and then go into desperation and into a campaign because suddenly you're losing things that you desperately care about. So it's still really to be addressed. And I hope, Westway Trust can be, a part of showing a new way, and kind of, if needs be, hold the hand of the council. But there's a long way to go. So people need to be committed and come forward and support us all with this.
Thank you. So we're really talking about moving away from this reactive position that we often find ourselves in, where we're reacting from a position of stress and trauma and necessity to an actual position of power ourselves. So we've got like 4 minutes left. We've come to the end of our session, more or less. But before we leave, I was thinking if each of you on the panel could just, in 1 minute or less, just give, what would you say to our community as a takeaway from this event? We already realize now that the language we use has to be tested, the way we do things has to be tested. So our libraries reimagining their future. Sean, in less than a minute, what's a takeaway for our community?
In the same way that you guys accepted me when I came to North Kensington, I feel that you need to speak to the people who are in your libraries and running them day to day. We also had our input for the Kensal Rise project, for the Kensal Library consultation. I know that there's the issue of what you feel for it there, but we were also involved because it's part of our daily life as well. If you speak to us in the libraries, we can help with that as well from the inside. It's not so much us and them, we're all the same community.
Thank you. Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I'll back up, the idea that, one, we must just use our libraries. That would be the main thing. The main message would be, if you're walking past the library, you've got 5 minutes on your hands, pop in, see what's going on. There's a notice board. There might be a reading event that you didn't know was on that you can go to. Support your libraries, support campaigns like this, look to the wider, stuff in the community. I mean, as Toby pointed out at the beginning, in our community, we have an amazing track record of campaigning and of success. And, the library is just one example of that. So my main message would be, just engage with your local library.
Thanks. And Toby?
Yeah, I would say reimagining is going to need to be a root and branch process. It's something that's going to have to deal with the red lines that that Ed's spoken about here. And I think actually it is something where we can use our imagination to really deal with these issues and deal with the future of our libraries in a systemic way, so that we actually stabilize their future and therefore can really begin to let our imaginations, you know, go free with confidence and some sense of stability for the future.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to thank the panel for taking their time to have this gathering, be part of this gathering with us tonight. Obviously, Sean and Ed and Toby, who stepped up at the last minute. Again, I want to send our condolences to our panelist who wasn't able to make it due to her bereavement. We're all thinking of you and sending you positivity and love. I want to thank Friends of North Kensington Library for, you know, for setting up the campaign in the first place that led to saving our precious library and to keeping this resource in our community, and to all the members of the community who gave their time, energy, their activism, you know, they're all really to keeping the campaign going. And for all the other campaigns that have been staged, many of the same people in you know, multiple campaigns in this area, for that spirit of activism. And want to thank Steamco, Nick Corsten, for helping us do this event, because without him, I don't think we'd have been able to do all this tech stuff. I mean, I'm still very much a novice, just learning about it, but I've enjoyed being part of this. So thank you so much, Nick. And Nick's with us for another 6 days. And I want to thank my organizing colleagues, of course, Toby, who's also on the panel, and Jacob. Thank you for your hard work. And also thanks to the City Life Local Living funding pot, to the St. Helens Ward councillors, the Colville Ward councillors, and the Norland Ward councillors for giving us the funds to make this event happen. So yeah, I wish you all a good evening, a great weekend, what's left of it. Enjoy. Hopefully we'll have some decent weather tomorrow, not too much rain. Thank you to all the community for taking part and watching this online. And make sure that you are back with us on Monday evening at 8 till 10 when it's Our Homes, Our Towers. And the host of that is Eve Weatherburn, who is a local activist, was involved in the campaign for the library, is a trustee of, I was going to say Octavia, look at that, so many organizations, of the Westway Trust, is a local resident. And on the panel, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we have Sue Duggins from the, what's the name of the towers? Yes.
Hazelwood and Adair.
Yes, and we have Tom Charles from Urban Dandy.
Tom Charles.
And we have Natasha Landstridge, who is part of Renegade Theatre, who will be doing some poetry for us. And hopefully we will have a very engaged studio audience. And we also have confirmation that Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith is going to be present and present some information, answer some questions. So yeah, have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you on Monday at 8 o'clock. Peace.
Thank you, Isis.
Thanks all.
Brilliant job. Brilliant.
So we are inviting you today
celebrating the power of our community to organise.
And now that the council has made a commitment that the library will remain a public asset and a library, this is a living testimony to the truth that collectively we can and do make a huge difference.
Come and join the Friends of North Kensington Library to celebrate a new phase in this historic building's life.
As one of the first public-built libraries, this library has always represented the energy and commitment of communities, organising to secure their future through self-education.
However, in recent years, the commitment of councils to this principle has been weakened by successive governments.
We all know it took the awful events of Grenfell Tower to put an end to plans that would have handed our library over to private interests.
But our diverse community here in North Kensington has a long and proud history
of standing up and resisting the onslaught of developers.
When us friends of the library got together, the whole case looked absolutely hopeless.
And it continued to look hopeless for much of the campaign.
Still, we persisted.
Through the most difficult moments, when losing the library to private interests seemed like a fait accompli, the Friends of North Kensington Library came together.
We were endlessly supported by the many community groups and organisations that make up the network of self-supporting and community-led groups that have been so important to securing the future of public space in this area.
Even when they are in ways we cannot predict, could not hope for, or aren't able to perceive.